Hello, BookTube, and welcome to a bright, sunny Tag Tuesday in which I am trying to distract myself from thinking only about the Cascadia subduction zone. All day long, that's mainly what my brain has wanted to think about. The Cascadia subduction zone and the possibility, the very real possibility, that in our lifetimes we will see it, so to speak, go off. In which case, a disaster the like of which none of us has ever seen will happen. And it's been a day of gaming out what those possibilities would be, how prepared the, for instance, Pacific Northwest is. I haven't succeeded very much in distracting myself from the Cascadia subduction zone, so I thought I would do a tag since it's Tag Tuesday, and I have a backlog of tags. And I was tagged in this one, the Moody Book Tag. I was tagged by Shawn the Book Maniac, who did a great video response to this, and then I saw that, as happens in our little corner of BookTube, all of the cool kids started doing this tag, and if they do, I have to. It's just pure high school peer pressure. So it's all about, it doesn't really require that you run around your shelves and pick down books or anything. It's mainly just about what kind of a reader you are, which I love anyway. I love questions like that anyway. So we'll do prompt number 1, which is, do you consider yourself a mood reader? And I don't. No, a lot of people do, and a lot of people that I've known over the years have said not only are they a mood reader, but that it's not possible not to be. That everybody reads by mood. The next thing you want to read on your shelf, no matter what, is going to be chosen by whatever mood you're in. I suppose there might be some truth to that, and it's probably true for me as well, but predominantly not. No, and for a very good reason. I have given over my reading entirely, almost entirely, to new releases in the American book market for that year. And those new releases have release dates. And I arrange my books, I arrange my new releases by release date, and on top of, really having grown to love reading, keeping track of that kind of reading ambit, I'm also commissioned to review a lot of those books. So release dates aren't a matter of mood. So a large chunk of what I read has nothing to do with what kind of a mood I'm in. It's just the next book up. Prompt number 2 is, do you set TBR lists? That, in BookTube parlance, for those of you who are just finding us, that is to be read. And do you stick to them? I don't, except for the very general kind of TBR that I just mentioned, which is that new releases have release dates. And sometimes I miss new releases, especially now that I'm not going to newsrooms, that I'm not getting 2 tubs of mail every day. Especially now, I am missing new releases. I'm playing more catch up with them than I used to. Just noticed today a couple of fairly major new releases that I have not seen at all. They're just plain got by me. That won't do at all. So in terms of a TBR, it is just covering the waterfront, covering my beat, new releases in the 15 or 16 genres that I read. Question number 3 is, do books affect you emotionally? Does the mood of a book rub off on you? The first part is definitely true. Yeah, books affect me emotionally. If I read something wrong, darling? Huge email consensus so far has been, although you miss a background of books to look at, you're very happy with Frida being back in the videos. I guess that's a trade-off for now. Not sure that it'll stay true. I don't think this is a permanent filming location. And quite a few of you knitters out there wanted this to have a little more prominence so that you could take a better look at it. There are a couple of you pointed out over the years that there are rather pretty knitted things all throughout here. There's an Amish Afghan. There's Pennsylvania Amish Afghan in one room. There are a couple of big Iowa Amish Afghans in this room, and a bunch of other stuff too. This is not Amish, obviously. But, anyway, what was I saying before the bean shook her head and interrupted me? Oh, right. Do books affect my mood? They do. If I'm reading something that's really horrifying, especially that I didn't know about, or that's really uplifting, a much rarer event, or just generally a happy book, or even a very sad book. I read a couple of years ago, a YA book about a stray dog who's living in the park in all weathers, who's terrified of approaching humans, and eventually finds a human who's willing to have the patience to adopt the dog. And there were no words in the book at all, and it really moved me. I was heartbroken and then uplifted. So that does happen. But the second part, does the mood of a book rub off on you, tends not to be true. No, mainly because I am not a particularly moody person when I'm not reading. So things tend to reset back towards equilibrium pretty quickly. Question number 4 is, when you're feeling sad, what do you read or do you not read when you're sad? And this is a matter of degrees for me. When I'm feeling just sort of crapulent, when I'm just sort of tetchy or not happy or whatever, because I am not a late millennial or a zillennial, when I'm feeling that way, I don't rush immediately to a doctor, demand life-altering, biochemistry-altering medication, and call them a racist Nazi if they don't immediately prescribe it without any examination whatsoever. Unlike zillennials, I'm a normal person. I don't expect to be just bouncingly happy every minute of every day. And for unhappinesses like that, little unhappinesses like that, I will sometimes achieve a kind of temporary cure in a book. I don't, generally speaking, go to a particular kind of book. Instead, that I don't know if I can explain it correctly. When I get a new book that seems intriguing in some way or other, my brain starts to align towards it, starts to hunger towards it, and that sitting down engaging with that book when I'm feeling a little sad about something I heard on the news or something that went wrong here, engaging with that, even if it's not a happy book, will always make me happy. And then the further the degrees go is the other part of the question. When it's genuine sadness, when it's not just the tetchy unevenness of a day, but rather genuine sadness, I don't go to books for that. There's something right in this picture frame that I go to for that. It was not books, though, no. Question number 5 is, most often do you use reading to escape, to learn, or to critically reflect? I watched Marc Nash's version of this tag, and I loved his answer to the first part of this, which is absolutely true and not well enough known in the 21st century. It's not well enough taken as written, and it should be, which is that if you're reading to escape, your mental energies would be really better spent looking at what it is you're trying to escape and fixing it so that you no longer want to do that. I guess in the lighter, just everyday sense of the word, to escape, I could maybe see it, but I don't know. I'm with Mark in this one instance, that it gives me the willies when people talk that way. But as to the others, to learn or to critically reflect, I agree with Mark. They're two sides of the same coin. I mostly read critically these days. Mostly, it's just I have to do it for a couple of hours every day anyway, just to get paid, and that just spills over. And it contrary to what a lot of people might think, for me, it hugely enhances the enjoyment. The visceral enjoyment of my reading is hugely enhanced by reading critically, even though when you read critically, books tend to disappoint you more than they did before. It doesn't matter to me. The enjoyment is still there, even though the books themselves disappoint. The exercise is wonderful. So I would say it's mostly that. Question number 6 is, what is a book that made you laugh out loud? I was just thinking about this the other day for the saddest possible reason, because Larry McMurtry died, and that made me remember how funny an author he was. I mean, we think of him, I don't think we think of him as a funny author, but there are scenes in The Last Picture Show, there are scenes in even Lonesome Dove, there are in All My Friends Are Going to Be Strangers, there are scenes all throughout, especially his contemporary novels. There are set piece scenes that are absolutely hilarious, just absolutely hilarious. There's a long set piece scene in Horsemen Pass By that just or maybe I'm not remembering the title correctly, but I think it is that. But one way or another, in his contemporary novels, you don't have to look far. There's a comic set piece in almost every one of them, and they are gorgeously done, just gorgeously done. One funny set piece of his that I was reminded of, just when I was thinking about him because he died, also reminded me of another funny set piece in Stop Time, Frank Conroy's memoir Stop Time, which has a long set piece about a food fight that works just beautifully. You can unplug it from the rest of the book. It's so gorgeous. So Larry McMurtry comes to mind as such an author, but Brian at Bookish, my nemesis, Brian at Bookish did a surreal and wonderful version of this tag, and he mentions in that tag Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon, also widely not regarded as a funny author, although there's some very funny bits in Gravity's Rainbow, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. In a couple of the really funniest bits in Gravity's Rainbow, you're laughing even while Pynchon is absolutely grossing you out. Some of the most grotesque prose in the repertoire, and yet you're laughing your head off because it's funny at the same time. But I would agree with Mason and Dixon. I would even agree with the scene that Brian alludes to in his video, the scene about the great rolling cheese in Mason and Dixon. It goes on for a long time, and about 20% of the way in, when you're reading it, you're suddenly realizing, oh wait, this is going to go on for a long time. He's going to make this into something, into a bit. And I confess, I was a big Pynchon fan before I got to Mason and Dixon. I immediately recognized in Mason and Dixon that I was reading probably my favorite book by him. And yet, about 20% of the way into that rolling cheese anecdote, I thought, no, this isn't going to work. You're not going to be able to sustain this for any length of time, and he does. It's very funny. So yeah, books do make me laugh out loud. Question number 7 is, what is a book that has made you cry, or if you don't cry, one that really moved you? I don't know about ugly crying. The typical thing on some areas of BookTube is to say that you ugly cried about, this book, that book, another book, this part of that book, to the point where it starts to sound mentally unbalanced. Honestly, I mean, just to be brutal about it, to the point where you're listening to this person and they're saying, I read this book, I ugly cried for the whole afternoon, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, face all blotched and red, tears streaming down my whole body. And then I had a book hangover, and then I went to my next book, and it was okay. And then I read another book, and I ugly cried for the whole afternoon, just tears blasting out of my face, couldn't speak, couldn't eat, was inconsolable. And that's a mental disorder. If reading is doing that to you, then you shouldn't be reading, and you also shouldn't be outside unsupervised. That's not, I get reading, it just moves me more than anything, I'm a really good reader now. That's you're sublimating a mental disorder into the perfectly ordinary and happy hobby of reading, and that doesn't happen to me, obviously. And if it happens to you, you should really seek professional help, because it's not normal. It's not healthy to be just gut crying your eyes out over something that you read in a YA novel. One way or another. I have, of course, been moved very deeply, including close to tears, by stuff that I've read in memoirs. Especially pet memoirs, in some fiction, nothing in quite some time, but even so, there's been quite a bit of it. For instance, the Goldbug Variations by Richard Powers. There are 2 scenes, one in particular in that book, that I defy you not to have a lump in your throat when you're reading it, if you're paying attention to the rest of the book. Or also a book I've mentioned on this channel many times before, The Brutality of Fact by Larry Kramer. The first volume is bizarre and hypnotic, but the second volume, the big second volume, which I am told I have a named blurb on the paperback. I do not have the paperback of the second one yet. I don't. Of the second, it was a 2-book thing, massive 2-book fictional creation that he lived just long enough to finish and file with his publisher. And I believe that I am blurbed on the paperback of the first book, which is The American People, but I believe I'm also blurbed on the second book, The Brutality of Fact, and I just don't have that paperback. And I haven't sort of been out, so I haven't rooted around in a bookstore to see. I ordinarily don't blurb chase. I ordinarily don't. If you were to look at my book collection, I make a little joke out of how few books I have that actually have, where I have them specifically because they have a name blurb by me on them. It's actually very rare. I don't go looking for them like that. But those I would like to have. I have the first one in paperback, and I should get the second one, but the second volume in that series, uh, um, I'm blanking right now on the exact titles because the series has a title and so does each book. And not ever the way that I would do things. But the second one is mostly about the 1980s AIDS epidemic, uh, especially its early catastrophic days when nobody knew what it was and no one thought it was survivable. When the way that it is now in America, uh, a survivable chronic problem was more than a dream. No one even had the courage to dream such a thing was possible. And that novel is unbelievably wrenching. Uh, but it doesn't have to be novels. Just making the easy mental jump to from the AIDS epidemic in Larry Kramer to, for instance, the AIDS epidemic in Angels in America. There are scenes in Angels in America by uh, I'm trying to remember a couple of the scenes. There are scenes in Angels in America that move me right to the edge of tears. I don't typically tend to cry when I'm reading, but move me, yes, absolutely. Just not, you know, uh, I open a book and all of my emotions are dialed to 11 and they're all ready on instant call for the next turn of the page. Oh my God, she cut down the sacred rose. Time to lose it. Just completely emotionally lose it for the whole of an afternoon. No, no crying on Book Talk for Steve. Number 8 is, what is a book that you didn't even know how you felt about? No idea how to answer this question. My literal job is to know what I feel about books. So I am confused sometimes about uh, classifications or the wisdom or lack thereof of a certain part of what an author does, but that's because I think multiple things about it, not because I don't know what I think. So no, there's never been a case like that. Number 9, are you more likely to read on a sunny day or a cloudy day? I read all the time, in all weathers. Marc Nash mentioned that he does most of his reading indoors, so it doesn't matter. That's true for me as well. That hasn't always been true. There were many times in my life where I read outdoors whenever I got the chance, whenever I could. But I read exclusively indoors now, and more to the point, when I'm reading, I bring my own terraforming with me. I bring my own ecosystem with me entirely. So I not only don't care what the weather is, I don't care about anything else either. The only thing that can just walk in and out of that bubble is whatever dogs I happen to have at the moment. They can do that, but nothing else can. Not trains, not people saying hello, not loud noises, not suspicious noises, not anything. Not hunger, not thirst, nothing. I bring my own little bubble. It just forms around me when I'm reading, even when I'm reading something predictable, or not all that standoutish. It's still, the bubble still forms, so the weather is immaterial. Prompt number 10 is, do you usually set the mood when you read? Music, lights, smells? No, I don't. The only thing that I tend to do, it's not setting a mood, but it is sort of taking an operative concern off the table before I go into that bubble. I know that bubble's going to form. It always does when I read. So since I know that it's going to form, before it does form, I will take care of a couple of things. I will try to make sure that I am positioned comfortably. Last thing in the world you want to do is come out of that bubble, come out of an even enjoyable period of reading with a twisted muscle in your back or a crick in your neck or something like that. But more importantly, again, the dogs that are around me. I want to make sure that they are settled and comfortable. For years and years with my old girls, the 2 dogs that I had when I started this BookTube channel, for years and years, once they passed 5 or 6 years old and they were older, and when dogs get a little older like that, they tend to sleep 23 hours a day. And once my girls got to that point, that was a ritual that we had. I would take them out, see to their physical needs, help them to eat, help them up onto the couch, help them to settle themselves. That wasn't really an issue with my I had a skinny, very lovely pointer. But I had also a fat, crazy basset hound named Lucy, she had her enormous face, her enormous head, and then her stubby little front badger paws, but then her body just went on for acres and acres back there, and she had no idea how to control it or where it was or what it was doing. So there was a sort of an elaborate process of settling Lucy on blankets and pillows until she was just perfectly comfortable, and settling Malin, and that ritual preceded a day of reading every day, and it also preceded a night of reading every night, and so that became a ritual that they liked as much as I did. Frida, of course, doesn't have anything like that. She is spry and and very nimble, and knows everything that's going on all around here. And although she can sleep deeply in the crook of my knee or right on my shoulder, she's still young and very energetic. She's in the prime of her life, and so even when she's sleeping deeply, her senses are still sweeping the place for mice. For the slightest sound, the slightest indication of any kind of movement that isn't me, I have seen her bolt up out of what struck me as a sound sleep and be across the room in less than a second. So, but even so, she's not at the point, is what I'm trying to say. She's not at the point yet where she's sleeping 20 hours a day. I don't know if terriers ever get to that point, but she's not at that point. But even so, I settle her down before I start to read. But that's the furthest that I go towards setting mood. The rest of it will settle itself. The rest of it, the book is going to start to weave a bubble around me. Sometimes to my detriment. The other day, I was waiting for an appointment. It was at a certain time. I was sitting there. I started to read, and someone finally got my attention, literally by putting their hand between me and the screen, to say, "Didn't you have an appointment a long time ago?" And I did. I just read right through it, and I've lost count in my life how many times I've done that. Read through an appointment, read through a departure date, just continued reading while friends who had set up to meet me were standing there right in front of me, just waiting. I've gone to meet friends in train stations or subway stations. I take a seat, waiting for them to arrive. I start to read. I keep reading. Then maybe I start to think, how long have I been reading? And I will turn, and they'll be sitting right next to me with a big smile on their face. Just thought it was the funniest thing in the world to sit and read right next to me without me knowing it. So I don't need to set the mood any beyond making sure that the little ones are all right, which has been easy enough to do, except for the one or two times in my life where the little one in question, where dogs in question have been extra needy. Most of those weren't mine. For most of my dog owning life, I had beagles, and beagles are very friendly, but they are not very needy. At least my boys never were. They loved being right next to me, but they didn't need to have, to be, "Oh, hi, how are you?" right there. But I also used to take in stray dogs wherever I traveled, and a lot of them would be very needy. So I'd be reading, and somebody's nose would be poking at the book to make sure that I was petting them or whatnot. But anyway, question number 11 is, can you leap from book to book, or do you need a buffer time between them? I can very much leap from book to book, but sometimes I like a palate cleanser. In fact, a lot of times I do. I can leap from book to book, but as I mentioned, a lot of my books are professional in nature. I'm not only reading them because they strike me as interesting, I'm reading them because I'm going to be accountable for them. I'm going to write about them. Whether that's the case or not, when I'm done with a book like that, often I will like a palate cleanser, which is not only much lighter fare. My typical go-to are little Signet Regency romances because they're so adorable, and they are guaranteed to have a happy ending. And most of the early ones that I'm talking about, the ones from the 1980s and early 1990s, are also very clever. They sparkle with a kind of wit. So they make a very enjoyable palate cleanser. And then I'll move on to the next book. That's usually the way that I do it. So I jump from book to book, yes, but not the same kind of book. Like, for instance, when I'm done crawling my way through Stalin's War by Sean McMeekin for a second time, detail by detail, minuscule footnote by footnote. When I'm done with that, I'm probably going to want to relax a little with a Regency romance or a murder mystery or something like that. Or maybe read Price of the Phoenix by Sandra Marshak and Myrna Culbreth for the 1 millionth time. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe a read along of Price of the Phoenix. Wouldn't that be fun? Anyway, that is the Moody Book Tag. I want to thank Shawn for tagging me. I'm sorry that it took so long for me to do it. Ordinarily, I do it right away. And I want you to do this tag if you have not. I have no idea. This one is now starting to gain a little traction and make the rounds. So I have no idea who's done it and who hasn't, who's been tagged in it and who hasn't. I think Marc Nash was tagged no less than 3 times in videos that I saw. So if you haven't done this and you want to, feel free, even feel compelled. All the cool kids are doing this tag. So that's it for my Tag Tuesday, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.